Hello and welcome to part 2 of the prequels. This part's going to be dealing all with rhythm and reading music, so let's get into it. To help out with the rhythm section, I have my newly acquired, just got it, a Vic Firth practice pad. So if you see me striking something just out of frame here, that's my practice pad. I'm not just hitting some random thing. I know it's kind of annoying that's literally just out of frame, in frame, out of frame, but what can you do? Anyways, let's get into rhythm. So rhythm is something that is very near and dear to my heart as an aspiring drummer and guitarist, and it's something I think does get overlooked a lot by the musical community as a whole. Although not as theoretically intensive necessarily as scales and harmonic theory, rhythm is really an essential part of your playing, and arguably even more important to playing in a genre, playing in a style, than necessarily knowing the scales and the harmonic essence of that style. That is to say, if you can't get the feel of a genre down, if you can't get a blues shuffle down, if you can't get the jazz swing down, then what you play never really sounds like jazz. Versus if you have kind of the cliched harmonic senses of the music you're playing, or even have something that's similar to it, you can kind of pass it off. Maybe it won't sound great, but regardless, in my opinion, if you don't have the rhythm, you don't have the music. So rhythm is an essential part of your playing. But regardless, that's the key point, is rhythm is very important. So let's start talking about rhythm. Alright, so to start things off, we're going to talk about measures and notes. A measure is a set amount of time. Kind of a vague definition, but we'll refine it as we go. So let's just start with that, though. A measure is a set amount of time. Rhythmic notes are notes that take up a certain span of that time. They're named after the amount of time they take up or the division they make. So a whole note takes up an entire measure, a whole measure. A half note takes up half a measure. A quarter, an eighth, a 16th, etc. 16th notes is a good place to stop. There are 32nd notes that you'll see, but getting smaller than that's a little too quick to get played. So we're going to stick with 16th notes just for the remainder of the lesson. Now, another way of thinking of dividing measure is how many beats are in a measure, and that's also how many beats then will reflect in the notes. So a whole note will have all the beats that a measure contains. A half note will have half the beats that a measure contains. Again, etc. But how many beats are in a measure? Well, that brings us into topic 2, which is called time signatures. Now, time signatures, as I grab mine, make sure my drumsticks don't fall. I've got my handy-dandy Led Zeppelin 2 tab book / standard notation book. Let me go here. Time signatures look like this. They're at, if you can see, I'll get a little closer. Right where my index finger is. It's a little small, so you might not be able to see it, but is the numbers 4 over 4. That's a time signature. That's usually where it appears right at the beginning of a tune. But what does it mean, 4 over 4? The first number answers that first question, how many beats are in a measure? 4, in the case of 4/4. The second number answers the other important question, which is, what's a beat? Obviously, if you have 4 of something, it's nice to know what you have of. And it answers that question by telling you what counts as a beat. So in the case, since it's a 4 on the bottom, a quarter note counts as 1 beat. So a quarter of the measure is 1, or 1 beat of the measure is 1. 4/4 is one of the most common time signatures, if not the most common time signature. Often it won't be noted. Sometimes to save time and effort, people will be lazy and they'll just write C, which stands for common time. That's because of how much it's used. It's called common time. The other common time signatures are 3/4, and then a little less, probably the least common, I can speak English, is 2/4. 2/4 you see a lot in hymns, and it's really, you can think of it as a variation of 4/4, or you can think of 4/4 as a variation of 2/4, whichever floats your boat. But it's not essential, so we're going to talk about that in a later lesson probably. Anyways, so 4/4 and 3/4 are your most important time signatures to really start with when you're first learning rhythms. And 4/4 is the king of all of them, because it's in tons of songs. A lot of songs. Any pop song you can think of, it's probably in 4/4. Alright. Now when you're counting out notes in 4/4, so we take those notes we talked about earlier, whole note, half note, etc. and you count them out in 4/4, this is how it ends up sounding. So again, we said one measure is 4 beats. So when we play a whole note, we're going to count out the whole measure, all 4 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. When we count out half notes, we count half of that. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Giving us 2 half notes to measure. This all makes sense. You know, in quarter notes, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 on every beat. Alright, now when we move into eighth notes, it gets a little bit different because instead of counting numbers, and you don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you count using phonetic devices or using words. Different people have different words, but I'm going to use the standard words that most people say and most books are written with using the terminology I use. So a common thing for eighth notes is to add and. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. A little bit quicker. Finally, 16th notes add another 2 words. So it's 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4 eanda, 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4 eanda. Even faster. Excuse me. How you count it out is important because it's also how you can kind of listen to it. And the biggest thing about counting these out is to make sure that you don't speed up just because you have more divisions and that you keep all the divisions the same. So that's to say, just because you're playing 16th notes, you physically are counting faster because you're saying more things, but you don't want to make the tempo suddenly faster. If your tempo is 1, 2, 3, 4, and you kind of 1 eanda, 2 eanda, 3 eanda, 4 eanda, yes, you are still, you're counting more, so you're saying things faster, but you don't end up going faster. That's a big thing that a lot of people have a problem with, is they hear a lot of units, so they tense up and they play faster, and then you're off tempo. Alright, so now to move on to reading music real quickly, that kind of recaps our rhythm. Oh, actually I forgot one thing. This does tie into reading music though, so I didn't totally lie. It's called feels. This also usually comes at the very beginning, at the very top. You'll see, you say feel. So this one says fast rock. That's the feel. What a feel is how a particular genre of music plays a piece, or how a piece is understood. There are a lot of feels, and more of it is connotative rather than denotive, meaning feels are defined by how the majority of people think of them. So when you think of a rock song, what do you think of playing as? That's kind of what they use as the definition of a feel. Some feels do have technical things to it, but we'll go into that for a later lesson. So real quick before YouTube cuts me off, I'm going to go through reading music, and I'm just going to use handy dandy sheet right here. I'm going to come in a little bit closer. So this is the 3 general things you'll see as a guitarist. So the thing at the top is known as a chord diagram. So it's the 6 strings going down. This black line at the back is usually used to be the nut or the end of the guitar neck. What will usually happen is a Roman numeral. For example, what is right here, I have the Roman numeral 10, indicates what fret you're supposed to play at, and the dots usually indicate where your finger's supposed to go. Another way, the one right beside that, I have a 7 there, so it's the 7th fret instead of the 10th fret. And it's a little unclear in this, so I'll probably do another lesson on this. That has the scale of degrees written out. So they say the same chord actually, just at 2 different frets, or 2 different starting frets. But one is notated with giving you the scale degrees for the notes, the other one's notated with just the fingering. Going to this, the other 2 things you commonly see are lines and tablature. A tablature is simply, again, the 6-string idea, same as the chord diagram, and you just have the number written of what fret you're supposed to play. Standard notation, in this case, we have treble clef, which is the common notation for guitar. It tells you what notes to play based on the lines, and the lines go by the acronym FACE, F-A-C-E for the spaces, and for the lines, it's every good boy deserves fudge. The other thing you will notice often in music is they'll extend the lines, so they'll keep drawing down lines. These are called ledger lines. This just means you keep counting. So, for example, the one that I've noted here on the bottom is a C, because the bottom line, as I told you, every. So we have C, E, count backwards 1 note is D, count backwards another note is C. Those are the fundaments to this. I'm actually going to introduce a little bit of a mini lesson later, but those are the fundamental parts of reading music. And if this continues, I think YouTube's going to cut me off, but if this part does get through, I will give a quick preview on the first lesson to other things you should master before you go into the lesson series. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and now we'll get into the real stuff.